Have you ever wondered what's actually going on inside your cells? Right now, it's like a bustling city with an entire economy based on energy. Today, we're going to take a look at how cells earn, spend, and manage that energy through these incredible processes: metabolism, respiration, and photosynthesis. So, here's the plan. We'll start with the very engine of life, metabolism. Then, we'll see how that engine is kept under control. After that, we'll dive into how cells actually harvest their fuel through respiration, get a close-up look at the cellular powerhouses, and finally, see how that fuel is made in the first place with photosynthesis.
All right, let's get right into it. First up, we need to understand the fundamental rules that run the whole show inside a cell. We're talking about the world of metabolism. So, what is metabolism really? Well, it's pretty much the grand total of every single chemical reaction happening inside a living thing. And who's in charge of this massive operation? These amazing proteins called enzymes. They're the master coordinators, making sure everything happens exactly when and how it's supposed to. Now, these metabolic processes usually follow one of two main patterns. On the left, you're looking at a linear chain. You can picture this like a factory assembly line, right? Something goes in one end, gets modified at each station, and a final product comes out the other side. But on the right, we have a cycle. This is more like a traffic circle, where a key molecule gets used and then regenerated at the end, ready to start the whole process all over again.
And this is where the real magic of enzymes comes in. See, every chemical reaction needs a little push to get going. It's called activation energy. Think of it like the effort it takes to push a giant boulder over a hill. That red line? That's the huge hill without an enzyme. But the green line shows what happens with an enzyme. It just dramatically lowers that barrier, making life's essential reactions happen fast enough to, keep us alive.
Okay, but you can't have an engine running at full blast all the time. That would be incredibly wasteful, not to mention dangerous. So how do cells hit the brakes? This brings us to a super important control system, inhibition. And there are two main ways cells slow things down. With competitive inhibition, you've got an imposter molecule that looks enough like the real thing to block the enzyme's main docking port, the active site. It's a direct competition for that spot. Then there's non-competitive inhibition. Here, the inhibitor doesn't block the front door, it binds somewhere else on the enzyme, which causes the whole thing to change shape, making the active site useless.
This graph really shows competitive inhibition in action. You can see with the inhibitor, the reaction starts out way slower. But, and this is the key part, if you just keep adding more of the real substrate, you can eventually hit that top speed. You're basically just overwhelming the inhibitor. It's a numbers game, and eventually, the real substrate wins.
Now let's contrast that with this graph for non-competitive inhibition. Look at this. No matter how much substrate you throw at it, you never get back to that original maximum rate. Why? Because the inhibitor has physically changed some of the enzymes, taking them completely out of the game. It doesn't matter how long the line of substrates is, some of the factory workers have just gone home.
The cell also has this other really elegant built-in control system. It's called end product inhibition. It's so smart. When the cell has made enough of a product, that very same product circles back to the beginning of the assembly line and just switches off the first enzyme. It's a perfect little feedback loop that basically says, okay guys, we're good for now, no need to waste resources.
So we have our engine and we have its controls, but an engine needs fuel, right? And that brings us to cell respiration, the process of cashing in our main energy source, which is usually a sugar like glucose.
So what is cell respiration? Simply put, it's how our cells carefully and methodically break down compounds like glucose to release their stored energy. And the whole point of the exercise is to capture that energy in the form of ATP. That's the universal energy currency that powers just about everything a cell needs to do.
At its very core, respiration is a whole series of what we call redox reactions. Now, that sounds complicated, but the idea is actually super simple. It's all about moving energy around. When a molecule loses electrons or hydrogen, we say it's been oxidized, and when another molecule gains them, it's been reduced. In that simple exchange, energy gets transferred from one place to the next.
The whole thing kicks off in the cell's cytoplasm with a process called glycolysis, which literally means sugar splitting. And that's exactly what happens. A single 6-carbon glucose molecule gets snapped in half. This first step gives us a tiny bit of ATP and loads up a few electron carriers. What we're left with are two smaller 3-carbon molecules called pyruvate. And these guys are now ready for the main event. But glycolysis, that was just the warm-up act. To get the really massive energy payoff, we need oxygen, and we need to move into the cell's main power plant, the mitochondrion.
And here it is, the famous mitochondrion. Its structure is just perfectly designed for making energy. The most important feature is that highly folded inner membrane. We call those folds the cristae. And that folding isn't just for looks. It creates an enormous surface area, giving more room to pack in all the molecular machinery for the final stages of respiration.
So inside the mitochondrion central space, or the matrix, our pyruvate molecules go through two more big steps. First, there's a quick link reaction that turns them into a new molecule called acetyl-CoA. Then, this acetyl-CoA jumps into the Krebs cycle. The main goal here isn't to make a lot of ATP directly, but to finish dismantling that original glucose and use its energy to load up a ton of these special electron-carrying molecules, NADH and FADH2.
And this is where the real action is, the electron transport chain. All those loaded up carriers from the Krebs cycle come here and drop off their high-energy electrons. As those electrons get passed down a line of proteins, kind of like a bucket brigade, their energy is used to pump protons into that tiny space between the two membranes. This builds up a seriously powerful gradient, like water piling up behind a dam.
Finally, all those protons that were pumped out come rushing back in through this incredible molecular machine called ATP synthase. It's like a tiny turbine, and the force of that flow is what powers the production of tons of ATP. So what's the final count? From just one molecule of glucose, the cell gets a staggering 36 to 38 molecules of ATP. That's just an incredibly efficient energy payoff.
So, we've just seen how cells burn through their glucose fuel with amazing efficiency. But this raises a pretty big question. Where does all that glucose come from in the first place? Well, let's flip the coin over and look at the other side of the energy economy, making the fuel through photosynthesis. The location for this incredible feed is another special organelle, the chloroplast. You only find these in plants and algae, and you can think of them as the cell's own personal solar panel factory. Its internal structure, with those neat stacks of discs called thylakoids, is perfectly engineered to capture as much sunlight as possible.
The whole process happens in two main stages. First, in what are called the light-dependent reactions, the chloroplasts capture solar energy and store it in some temporary battery-like molecules. Then, in the light-independent reactions, they use the energy from those batteries to build stable, long-term energy storage in the form of glucose, all from the carbon dioxide in the air. This process is literally the foundation of the food chain for almost all life on our planet. So when you finally step back and look at the whole picture, you see this absolutely beautiful, perfect cycle. Photosynthesis uses sunlight to build glucose, and cellular respiration breaks down that same glucose to release energy. One process makes the fuel, and the other one burns it. And it just leaves you with this one kind of awe-inspiring question. How does this elegant, interlocking cycle of energy power the unbelievable complexity and diversity of pretty much all life on Earth?